Good morning, dear friends. This is the second day of the International Volunteer Camp, and indeed, our listeners and viewers were asking what we were going to do in the coming days, what speakers are going to present. There was some mystery around the agenda, and the questions keep coming. Uh, some people try to reconcile the agenda and our speakers. Yesterday, we announced the agenda for today, and today we will start with the very important things, with the heritage. This is indeed very important. We will discuss construction model for the volunteer camp to maintain and preserve the sites of cultural heritage. Let me introduce Anna Gubina, Deputy Head of the Department of Educational Programs of the Volunteer Center Association. She will share her unique experience. Anna, the floor is yours. Good morning, friends. I hope you are positive and you are looking forward to a productive day and the weather doesn't stand in the way. So we will discuss cultural heritage. Cultural heritage has been on our agenda for a few years. We have developed guidelines on how to work with volunteers to support the cultural heritage. Last year, we developed a model of international volunteer camp to preserve the cultural heritage sites. Our goal was, which was obvious for us, and I hope it will become obvious for you, that the International Volunteer Camp is a very interesting and effective tool for organizing volunteer activity to preserve cultural heritage sites. And we wanted many people to learn about this model in this country and in other countries, although in other countries this model is already widespread, so that museums try to test this model, museums and other cultural entities, and to make this model more popular among volunteers. So let's discuss volunteer camps. So what is an international volunteer camp? Everything is simple. It is a volunteer camp, a campus. It's a way to engage volunteers where a stable community of volunteers arrives at a cultural heritage site or some territory where there are certain issues, and for a certain period of time, they stay in this territory and perform some actions, practical actions to address those issues very intensively, very actively, managed by people who organized this volunteer camp. The main characteristics of this volunteer camp are that a practical task is the cornerstone of the activity of the camp, and also an atmosphere, a unique atmosphere, due to the fact that volunteers stay in the same place for quite a substantial amount of days. And what is also important is intercultural exchange. What are the advantages? What are the benefits of international volunteer camps? Number one benefit is for the organizers of volunteer activity, the benefit is reduction of logistical costs. The volunteers don't need to be commuted back and forth. So you're confident that people are here. You don't have to control their shifts. They live in the same area. They are in close contact with the managers. So logistics becomes very simple because the volunteer group is stable. You don't need to teach them every day. You give them instructions in the beginning and then they go ahead with the task. Also, mass media, the government entities are engaged and interested to track the development of this volunteer camp. I will also speak about international volunteer projects. What type of international volunteer projects we may have and what issues are addressed by those international volunteer camps. We will today focus on campus aimed at preserving cultural heritage sites, but this is not the only objective addressed by international volunteer camps. There are many other goals and objectives. On the screen, you can see that those can be programs aimed at environmental protection, protection of agriculture, archaeological findings, cultural and artistic activity, creative programs, national and cultural programs aimed to maintain cultural traditions, environment, entertainment, working with kids, crafts, development of crafts, and restoration of cultural heritage sites, buildings, and also work with unprotected groups of people like elderly, handicaps, refugees, and other people in need. Today, we will speak about camps that do, for example, restoration of cultural heritage sites, archaeological camps, and the like. So again, what are the benefits of such volunteer camps? So, oh, sorry, this is the classification of volunteer camps. We will speak about the benefits later. So, what volunteer camps we may have? They're very varied and they can be classified or grouped by different characteristics. For example, by the scope, like we may have some small camps, for example, camps aimed at preservation of cultural heritage. Those could be small archaeological camps, archaeological trainee programs for three universities: Vladimir State University, one Moscow University, and one international university. So, an interesting combination of students, but the camp itself is quite small. It is local. We may also have regional scale camps where people, volunteers, come from one and the same region. It may also be tied uh, to the budgeting. If the camp is supported by the regional budget, it is not legally possible to invite volunteers from other regions because the money has been allocated from the regional budget. In Pustezersk, we have a regional camp where only regional volunteers from Nenets autonomous region may take part. I'm sure that many of you who listen to us online and here, they've heard about such regional camps and they took part in their activities. In Pskov, for example, we have the cultural volunteer camp. As far as I know, this camp was presented to President Putin, and now this camp is going to take place every year. And certainly there are international cultural camps. This is what we're going to discuss today. Such camps also take place in this country and overseas. They're widespread. Yasnaya Polyana Museum holds an international camp every year with Sfera volunteer company. So they live in Yasnaya Polyana and help the museum. As far as the participants are concerned, international volunteer camps can be very varied. They can be camps for kids. An example would be Mikhailovsky Pushkin Museum, Dobrokote Museum. This is a tent camp with kids or for kids. There are student camps. We have mentioned already that Tanais offers a trainee program for students, so it is a student camp. We may also have corporate camps. In Yasnaya Polyana, there are corporate camps, corporate offsites, including Moscow and Tula region. So people from Moscow and Tula, uh, companies, corporate entities organize camps and come to Yasnaya Polyana. Uh, there are general access, general admission camps where people from different groups and of different ages may take part in. For example, all camps under the auspices of UNESCO require general access of the public. They want to see no discrimination in their camps. Also, camps may be family based. Such camps often take place in foreign countries, like National Trust of Great Britain, of the UK, has a program called Working Weekend Program with or for families with kids from 8 years of age. Such camps are very interesting as well. Also, camps can be grouped by the number of people. They can be small and large. In Belazersky National Park, for instance, last year there was a camp with only 4 participants, and the goal was to renovate a church, a historical church, and there are large camps with up to 100 participants or even more, and examples of such camps as well. So the number of participants may vary. Camps can also be grouped by uh, labor consumption. History Report is a US organization that classifies camps by labor intensity, and they even have icons representing the level of labor intensity. So when they receive an application, they give a certain icon, a certain classification to the camp. I think it's yellow, orange, and green. So, for instance, if you have to walk up the hill for 3 years before you start your shift, this would be a labor consuming camp. Also, by duration, camps can be short-term, mid-term, and long-term. Short-term camps are, for example, working weekend camps, and we like this format. Yasnaya Polyana Museum, for example, invites people uh, on weekends, gives tasks to people, provides them hotel accommodation, and these are short-term camps. There are mid-term camps that last from 7 days to 10 to 14 weeks. French organization REPA holds midterm camps like that for several months in a row. Well, international volunteer camps analysis shows that the most widespread length of a camp is 14 days, the most popular length. Why 14 days? It's comfortable, it's convenient. Volunteers have enough time to understand the goal, the objective. They learn about the country, but they don't get tired from what is happening around them, and they don't lose motivation to participate in activities. So 2-week camps are very good and popular. Also, camps can be classified by the scope of costs. Some camps are free. There are camps where volunteers don't have to contribute anything. For example, camps under the auspices of UNESCO in association with Tatarstan government, Bogart organization provided a free of charge camp. It was really free for all volunteers. Even commuting from Moscow to Kazan was paid by the organizers. And there are also partial payment and full payment participation volunteer camps. Partial payment are quite popular in Western countries and foreign countries, where a volunteer pays for railway fare or airfare, also pays insurance, medical insurance, and pays an admission fee that partially covers accommodation and meals. And there are camps with full payment of participation when a volunteer fully compensates its residence in the camp. In Russia, free camps will not be there soon, I'm afraid, given the large events when volunteers were paid in full are not so often. Well, I guess volunteers will want to have some at least partial payment admission. Camps can be educational and practical. Every one of you who participated in the International Volunteer Camp last year, and they were online camps, they took part in the educational camp. And today we also have an educational program. And also international camps can be practical. Practical international volunteer camps are those camps we are discussing today. First of all, the cornerstone of an international volunteer camp is a practical task, a practical goal. However, there are also educational volunteer camps. For example, Kiji Museum, Общее дело organization holds a camp in which Kiji museum employees teach volunteers on how to work with wood, teach them to do woodwork, and restore wooden historical sites. Practical campuses are more widespread, practical camps. In those camps, volunteers perform activities or perform tasks given to them by the organizers. By the type of accommodation, there are remote camps, although this is situation-specific, pandemic-specific camps. We believe that camps should be off-site, should be offline, but certainly there are remote camps now. There are tent-based camps. Offline, when people come over and work together. There are online-offline camps, such as the one we are having today. Also, there are camps when people first learn some skills online, and then they come over to a given site and apply their knowledge to some practical tasks. Well, certainly a remote format has become quite popular amid the pandemic. Strangely enough, such camps may also be practical. Belozersky Museum, a national park, back in 2020 held an international camp called Inozemskие сказы, where volunteers deciphered various fairy tales popular in that region. Well, there are tent-based camps, there are stationary camps. Stationary camps usually rely on some hotels or school children camps. Well, they offer different level of comfort. For example, if it is a school, then well, comfort is not very high. And also we have family-based camps, and it is more a US story than a Russian story. And also there are volunteer camps without accommodation. although living together is an important characteristic of an international volunteer camp that helps people get together well.
Tent campuses often take place in on the premises of reserve museums, and probably this is the most convenient and democratic form. The organizers are spared a lot of expenses, and volunteers can actually come with their own tents. Usually, this is about expeditions, the expeditions of Russian Geographical Society, and of course, reserve museums prefer tent campuses. The territory of the reserve museum is in itself an object to be preserved and protected, but still the volunteers manage to find spots where they can make a fire and set up their tents. For example, Yasnaya Polyana Museum has a hotel of their own, and this is where they uh, this is what they offer to volunteers whenever volunteer campuses arrive for any type of assistance. And it is usually free of charge for the residents of such hotels. For example, in Irkutsk, when volunteers came for assistance with some events, they were lodged in hotels there. So, what are the benefits of being part of international volunteer campuses? International volunteer campus gives you a unique opportunity to get in touch with people from other countries and to communicate with them out of the urban context, out of the context of incomplete contact. Because you know that when people live side by side somewhere, um, this is when they are in a full scale contact, in a full scale communication environment. They can arrange common cooking sessions, they can spend their free time together, and contacts like these are usually maintained throughout life afterwards. The second benefit is that you can travel somewhere and see other places for free. So this way, you take part in a mini tourist project with immersion into a different culture, with getting acquainted with a different country. I know that some organizations provide even the recreation program for volunteers who assist during festivals or forums or any other events. And when you're actually live in the country for some time, you can see it from a different perspective than when you come just as a tourist. International Volunteer Campus is an excellent opportunity to expand your skills and competencies. In other countries, I know that extensive educational courses have to be undertaken by volunteers on the verge of significant events. Of course, legislation differs from country to country when it comes to preservation of cultural monuments. Some countries forbid non-professional staff from getting access to historical monuments. Other countries are more loyal and require at least some qualification to be demonstrated to be able to get access to monuments. Still, other countries require the guidance of a professional architect, and this is how volunteers can participate in the restoration of historical and cultural monuments. So, Volunteer Campus is a unique opportunity to boost up your skills, to get new knowledge, and this is really outstanding. I know that in France, mm, uh, I know that in France, there was the survey of the input of volunteers in preserving the monuments of culture and history, and in what volunteers actually receive from being part of the whole process. Of course, many respondents said that it's the opportunity to get new knowledge, to expand skills, to share experience. So if you don't have international volunteer campuses, it is high time that you had one. There are organizations, and you see the logos in the slide. These organizations support international volunteer campuses. Uh, all of these organizations operate under the auspices of UNESCO. Here you can see the logo of the World Heritage Volunteers. This is a this is a small character impersonating a young volunteer working to preserve cultural heritage. Slightly below you can see the emblem of the historical volunteer corpus. The global initiative of UNESCO volunteers does not arrange campuses, but they provide certain competitions among countries to select national projects and then support the implementation of the project. I know that in St. Petersburg there were 3 campuses, volunteer campuses, um, arranged within the context of projects that were supported by the UNESCO program. And actually, you can access their websites anytime and find out more information. Volunteers can try and participate in any camp. I know that somewhere there is a small fee for training. You can see the emblem of the American Historical Volunteer Society History Corps, and they're very active in preserving places of interest that are significant to the history of the nation. They have on-staff crew, unlike other organizations who usually have camp leaders working with volunteers. So if you're an experienced participant of volunteer campuses, so probably you will be in a good position to occupy the position of campus leader, working with volunteers and steering, navigating them, providing them some tuition. Slightly below is the logo of the organization that arranges campuses throughout the world, and in the right-hand bottom corner, you can see the emblem of Rampart. That's the organization in France that also supports volunteership. And the European Heritage Volunteers of the European Heritage, this organization cooperates with Rampart, and also you can find any projects that take place in Russia but are supported by these international organizations. Um, Other uh, places where you can find invitations to international volunteer campuses can be found online. We have aggregators of volunteer vacancies, including in the country and abroad. Sphere, World for You, these are the titles of these organizations. World Surfing. You can enter their webpage and read their terms and conditions for participation. The Russian Geographical Society is currently running a lot of international volunteer campuses. Well, I think they may not be international, but they are quite interesting, and they do not pertain immediately to preserving the cultural heritage. But the campuses of the Russian Geographical Society deal with preserving the nature heritage. Uh, as far as I remember, back in 2019, the Russian Geographic Society ran several dozens of volunteer camps in many reserve museums throughout the country, providing unique opportunities for volunteers to visit places where you may never uh, find yourself in your whole life. Within the framework of the mobility program, and by the way, this is a flagship program for volunteer centers, which allows volunteers and organizers to take part in various events, programs, and traineeship programs to improve their qualifications, to expand qualifications and knowledge, and then so that they would come back and apply their knowledge and skills and practice. Volunteers can participate in various other formats of camps where they can help um, the staff of reserve museums with preserving, with saving animals or other species of flora and fauna. Mm, Even if this year you won't be able to visit many of the outdoor tent campuses and reserve museums because of the weather, next year there is something to think about. So seek the mobility program for volunteers online and sign up for any of the campuses that interest you. The benefits of the mobility program is that it covers all the expenses of volunteers to actually come to the place, live there, and meals are also covered. So regardless of where people live and study, uh, all their expenses are covered when they come as volunteers for assistance um, with some projects. What about the algorithm of preparing and running a volunteer camp? This is a relevant subject for the organizers of such campuses, heads of museums or non-profit organizations, but this is probably also important for volunteers because this information helps volunteers to look at the whole procedure from the inside and understand the process of preparing and running the campus so that they could find what is the best way to yield the most efficiency out of your stay. Nonprofit organizations can actually select two modes of these campuses: independent running of such campus, or running the campus in association with a volunteer organization or association that already has such an experience. I know that Yasnaya Polyana Reserve Museum uh, usually signs partnerships with volunteer organizations that help to arrange such a volunteer campus. Speaking about the independent organization of the volunteer campus, everything starts with uh, making a decision that such a campus is really needed. If a cultural institution or non-profit organization has an array of tasks that it cannot address on its own, and it realizes that these tasks require a stable volunteer team and intensive work of volunteers within a certain period of time, then such an organization decides that uh, such a campus needs to be arranged. Then the head of the campus is appointed, and then the planning is started for the types of activity to be entrusted to volunteers. The scope of works for volunteers has to be stable, has to be accessible. Volunteers need to participate in the works every day, and works should not depend on the weather conditions. Where the scope of works should be adequate. Just imagine that in a bad weather, volunteers will be forced to remain indoors, and they will um, spend their valuable time doing nothing. So um, this is efficient neither for you nor for volunteers. So think about the types of and formats of activities for volunteers very thoroughly. So this is the independent mode of running a volunteer campus. Speaking about the planning of the number and functions of volunteers, everything starts with the amount of tasks to be entrusted to volunteers. And usually volunteers in international campuses work 5 to 6 days a week, 5 to 6 hours per day. Knowing this, you will have a better understanding of how many volunteers you need, and based on your personal tasks, you will be in a good position to determine what volunteers can help you with, what specific works will be needed to be done by volunteers. Then you start thinking about the required qualifications of volunteers. Um, if you need just volunteers to clear up the outdoor territory from debris or fallen trees and so on, then you will not require very high qualifications, right? The main thing is that your requirements to volunteers are not excessive. If volunteers trim shrubs, then don't require them to be highly skilled and highly qualified. If it's an international campus, an important requirement is that people speak at least one of the languages that are formal languages of the campus. If there are two main languages in the campus, Russian and English, then you have to make sure that at least one language is spoken by volunteers.
So ensure smooth communication within the camp. So after you define what type of volunteers you need to select the format of your camp. At the previous slides, we had a look at the different formats. It all depends on how interesting your camp is. If you offer some unique training, motivation program, in this case, you may require an admission fee. If you offer comfortable accommodation and good meals, again, you can ask for an admission fee. If you invite people to come over with their own tents, resources, uniform, and food, in this case, an admission fee would be excessive. So, depending on the accommodation you offer and depending on what you do in the camp, you may assign an admission fee or not. After you define the format of your camp, you should define the timelines of the camp. This is important. The timeline should be adjusted for seasonality. Collecting hay in spring is not possible. So the camp timeline should also be adjusted for your target audience. For example, if you want to engage students, June is not the best time because they have their exams in June. That's why your timeline should be adjusted for all these factors and start engaging volunteers. It's important that engaging volunteers is a lengthy period, should take some time to prepare. So it's important to start communicating, to launch the camp communication campaign to be able to engage the appropriate volunteers, especially if this is an international camp. Your uh, informational campaign should be started several months before the launch of the camp because people will need time to get their visas, buy tickets, communicate with you, and people will not be able to do this unless they learn about the camp ahead of time, well ahead of time. Also, if you need people with specific competences, you will have to do the selection, define selection criteria, offer tests, interviews, or some contest, like, for example, an essay contest. Yasnaya Polyana Museum, they don't simply accept applications. Well, they do accept applications on the email and then select the people. Some organizations have look at the background of volunteers to make their choice. So volunteer selection can take place at the same time as accepting the applications for participation. So as you engage volunteers, you need to plan how you're going to prepare volunteers. You will never have fully prepared volunteers. Also, please remember that you may you may recruit volunteers without competences and then train them, or vice versa. You perform a more meticulous selection and then you'll get a high quality of volunteers. But preparation and training is necessary. For example, when people come to your camp, you will have to brief them on the rules of operation, show all the infrastructure, toilets, cafeteria, etc. Also explain how to behave at the cultural heritage site, explain the things that they're supposed to do. It's a lengthy process, can be organized in different formats. Also, some of this instruction provisioning can take place online, or you can also publish some guidelines or brochures for volunteers, because international camps for preservation of cultural heritage sites are very practical. It is important to explain what types of activities the volunteers are expected to perform safely and effectively. Therefore, To ensure proper operation of the camp, you will have you will need to have a system of volunteer management. So those camp leaders that ensure operation of the volunteer team, they also ensure volunteer interaction with the representatives of the cultural heritage site, with the people who distribute jobs to volunteers. So in such camps, there are usually two managers, two leaders. One is a camp leader or an animator. We, we sometimes call them animators, and a technical leader. This is a person who defines who does what are the deadlines, what are the dates, and he or she keeps track of the quality of uh, work. And the first lead is responsible for the motivation, entertainment, and other operational aspects of the camp. As you prepare the camp, think hard about the motivational program. It may be more or less thorough, but it should be in place anyway and include uh, presentation of letters of appreciation, oral appreciation, verbal appreciation, or placing the best volunteers' photos on some informational resources on the website of the organization who is the host of the camp, some closing ceremonies, congratulations with birthdays, maybe some tours to the cultural heritage sites, maybe some unique tours specifically for the volunteers. So you have a lot of room for creativity here, and there are a lot of opportunities to make people comfortable and interested to keep them motivated. After you do this, you create a working schedule for the camp. I already mentioned that the working week should be about 30 hours with 2 days off. So each day should have some leisure time, entertainment activities, recreational activities. So after the work schedule is in place, then create a training program. This is a standard managerial effort. Also, you will have to analyze the costs of the camp operation. Then you make contracts and in the end, analyze the effectiveness and efficiency. Engagement of volunteer organizations. Things may be even easier. Here we also make decisions, assign process owners, understand what types of activities will have to be performed, and after that, we look for a partner in the not-for-profit sector to implement the idea. How to look for such entities? This is simple. You can turn to regional authorities responsible for overseeing volunteer activity. You may have a look at the website dobro.ru. You may turn to All Russian organization Quopik, Cultural Volunteers organization, or you can check out aggregators of volunteer vacancies available in the Russian Federation. Get in touch with them and plan camp organization. Certainly, you will need to have a contract in place, an agreement, and together with an entity that you have selected, you will plan for the number of volunteers, their functions. So the volunteer organization will help you do all this. You will work together. And also be mindful of the time of looking for volunteer organizations. So you need to plan everything ahead of time. So planning is everything. So these are the steps to take to have a camp with a dedicated volunteer organization. The only difference is that this volunteer organization will be a driving force which has expert knowledge in this area, and it is easier for this organization to plan the number of volunteers, to create a schedule of events, etc., schedule of activities. Then we coordinate the volunteer plan, approve the campus program, and schedule activities, recruit volunteers, make contracts with suppliers of all services, have a camp, hold a camp, and then analyze efficiency. Basically the same thing, but together and in association with a volunteer organization with experience in this area. So I don't think we'll speak about resource allocation for volunteer camps. I'm sure you have a good idea, a good understanding that for a volunteer camp, you will need financial resources, technology resources, human resources, educational and methodological resources, logistics and information resources. You may take part in some contests to get hold of grants and subsidies. There are special programs in which you may take place and get a grant to organize such a camp. There is the Cultural Foundation grants or Patanian grant, Changing People in the Changing World, organization grants, children's grants. And together with these organizations, we have prepared the guidelines for organizing international volunteer camps. Well, technology resources may be found in partner organizations. You may turn to a regional resource center for such resources. Human resources may be found in partner organizations of higher and vocational education centers. There are resource centers that can help you get in touch with universities and colleges. Local governments and municipal governments may also provide you with support and organization. And as for information resources, those may be own websites, partner websites, mass media. We understand that we're living in the pandemic times. There are certain restrictions, and a lot of volunteer camps have become remote or hybrid, offline, online. But in spite of the pandemic, the coronavirus pandemic, the camps take place even this year. But you need to account for a lot of things like social distancing, self-protection, aids, guidelines applicable to the pandemic, single room accommodation if possible. Well, to summarize my talk, I would like to say that international volunteer camps aimed at preservation of cultural heritage sites is a unique format and unique opportunity both for volunteers and organizers of volunteer activity. This is a format that help us salvage cultural heritage sites and also contribute contribute to cultural heritage and also build international cooperation in the area of volunteer efforts. It helps establish intercultural relations. It's a great format that actually removes boundaries, helps us unite, consolidate in order to preserve and maintain cultural heritage, to maintain the historic look of our countries and cities. So if you are not familiar with this format, if you didn't have enough knowledge about it, hopefully my talk helped you understand it better. And I gave you some ways and tips on how to establish a volunteer camp, and I will be happy to answer your questions. Yes, our attendees do have some questions. A lot of people ask the following. Well, to be honest, you provided a very detailed presentation, but here's a question. What is the difference between a trainee program and a international cap? What is the main difference? The main difference between an exchange program and an international camp is in its practical objective. International volunteer camp sets certain goals and objectives which are practical and includes practical activities on a cultural heritage site or addressing another practical matter or issue for which volunteers are consolidated in an international camp. An exchange program, a trainee program, is a form aimed at improving the competences of participants. If an international volunteer camp is aimed at supporting a specific uh, individual or heritage site, a trainee program is aimed at self-development of volunteers. Another question from our attendees: what are the fees? What are the participation fees in international volunteer camps? Is there some threshold or range of fees? Well, they may be very different. We need to be very specific which camp we are talking about. Here is one example, between 150 to 300 euros. So this is quite an expensive thing, but you get full accommodation for that. In the Russian Federation, international camps are either free, no admission fee, or between 4 to 7,000 rubles for 14 days of stay. Mobility camps have no fees, so basically volunteers pay for their accommodation. Well, Samalba volunteer camp in Pskov region, cultural volunteers got together there and they lived there for 2.5 months. This is an example of a camp, but it wasn't an international camp. But once it becomes annual, maybe it will get a status of an international camp. And therefore, the question is how to acquire the status of an international volunteer camp from the legal standpoint. What do we need to do? Do we need to interact with the Foreign Affairs Ministry, or which entities we need to approach? Well, it is not a big issue. If you want to have an international camp, and if you're a cultural entity and you want to host this camp, so basically the Ministry of Culture releases a decree and order for organization of such a camp. Certainly, you will need certain support of the government that will issue a regulation, a decree on the holding of such a volunteer camp. No other agreements will be required. No. Uh, well, you'll certainly need some permits, some regular permits. If you are planning to host a volunteer camp in some public area, you will need some regular permits and approvals. Well, the regulation is in the internet, so please check it out. The only thing you'll have to do, due to the fact that foreign citizens will arrive in the Russian Federation, you will have to register them in the Russian Federation within 7 days after their arrival in Russia. And the last question, how long should be a camp for it to be considered a camp? 1 month, 2 months? I think I answered this question. Well, we may have short-term, mid-term, and long-term camps. So we may have weekend camps like Yasnaya Polyana camp, or International Trust of Great Britain offer working weekend camps. So this is Friday to Sunday camps. and they are international camps, but the average duration of an international volunteer camp in order to implement all its tasks and for the volunteers to be trained properly, the average duration is 10 to 14 days.
Thank you very much. Actually, we have run out of questions by now. Thank you, Anna. Thank you for your profound speech. Currently, we're running an international volunteer camp, and in Bashkortostan, we're going to get together offline and look at sites of cultural heritage. And I think that would be a perfect example of that very camp where volunteers can get their training free of charge. And that's something we mentioned already. And the actual campus format is a very interesting one. And we are expecting organizers, participants, volunteers to get together in Bashkortostan. And in 10 minutes time, we're starting a new session where Matvey Masalsev, the deputy chairman of the volunteer organization, will tell you about the resource base for volunteer organization, which is very relevant. Thank you.
Я получил образование в библиотеке совершенно бесплатно, отмечал знаменитый писатель Рэй Брэдбери. Современные учреждения культуры, библиотеки, музеи, театры – не просто места, где можно прикоснуться к прекрасному. Они помогают в саморазвитии и образовании. И для создания новых форматов и событий им нередко бывает нужна наша с вами помощь.
Волонтеры нужны для того, чтобы делать то, что мы не можем делать без них. В частности, нам волонтеры помогают быть больше, чем музей.
Для многих волонтерство открывает новые возможности. Человек думает, а что такое библиотека? А что такое музей? Это пыльные книги, это пыльные экспонаты. Но когда приходит сюда в качестве волонтера, он видит совсем другую картину. Он понимает, что именно здесь можно реализовать свои интересы.
Программа «Волонтеры культуры» создает и развивает добровольческое движение в самых разных уголках страны, как в столице, так и в регионах, как в больших городах, так и в сельских поселениях. Мы оказываем всестороннюю поддержку волонтерскому сообществу. С нашей помощью добровольцы могут реализовать свой потенциал и получить новые компетенции.
Библиотеки, как и любая культурная институция, сегодня, конечно, не могут жить и обходиться без участия жизни волонтеров и их вклада. И наша библиотека номер 119, библиотека времени, не исключение. Я вообще считаю, что волонтеры – это в первую очередь друзья, люди вовлеченные, которые разделяют ценности библиотеки.
Библиодобровольцы – это люди, которые помогают библиотекам практически во всех вопросах, которые возникают. Без них невозможно представить деятельность библиотек.
Присоединяйтесь к программе «Волонтеры культуры». Вы сможете не только помогать любимому музею или библиотеке, но и всесторонне развиваться. Новые знания и практический опыт помогают добровольцам в достижении поставленных целей. Главное – менять к лучшему жизнь вокруг. Помощь добровольцев нужна учреждениям культуры в любом городе. Ждем вас!
В значит волонтеры.
Почти в каждом городе есть старинные здания, которые определяют его лицо. Делают город отличающимся, необычным. Во многих таких зданиях сегодня располагаются музеи. Сюда приходят туристы, здесь происходят культурные мероприятия. Но многие объекты культурного наследия нуждаются в реставрации, ремонте, поддержке. Хотели бы что-то сделать для этих зданий, помочь в их восстановлении? Присоединяйтесь к программе «Волонтеры культуры». Программа поддерживает добровольческое движение, помогает беречь культурное наследие и исторический облик наших городов. Став участником, вы научитесь новому, поставите перед собой интересные, необычные цели, сможете реализовать собственные идеи и проекты, собрать свою команду для того, чтобы реальными делами помогать сохранению истории и развитию культуры.
Я думаю, что волонтерское движение – это вообще очень важный факт нашей жизни, вот современной. Волонтеры очень нужны, и мы все очень нуждаемся в них.
Принять участие в программе «Волонтеры культуры» может каждый. Помогайте сохранять свои города и их культурное наследие. Возраст не важен. Получить нужные умения и внести свой вклад могут все. Участвуйте в программе «Волонтеры культуры».
Я уже записался. Увидимся.
Dear friends, I welcome you back to our next session. And now we are starting a very important and relevant meeting with a person thanks to whom a gigantic ecosystem is developing. And allow me to introduce Matvey Mastaltsev, Deputy Head and Chairman of the Council of Volunteer Centers, and also host of the platform called Dobro.rf. He is on air with us right now, and I hope that all people who are with us today will be able to benefit from the information about what this system is about, what specifics is there about the system, and most importantly, what new functionality has been added recently. So, Matvey, the floor is yours. So, good time of day. Thank you very much for such a profound introduction. Dobro.rf or .ru is my core product. This is the largest platform operational right now in Russia, specifically for good deeds. This is not just a platform for a large number of users, but that's an ecosystem, a platform where volunteers can try and find projects where they can be helpful. This is also an educational site, and for example, Dobro University is where you can get your training as volunteers, and Dobro.конкурсы or competitions is where you can share your stories, your success stories, which incentivize people to join our team. We also have quite a number of other modules like analytics. This service aggregates whole data bulk, and you can actually access data from various regions and look at how volunteer movements develop in various regions of the country. A few figures. So our platform has 2.5 million registered volunteers, and on Monday we celebrated the 5th anniversary since our registration. So more than 30,000 organizations, including foundations, non-profit organizations, and federal executive authorities, down to minor school groups. So if you participate in any way in volunteering, you can register with our platform. This is also 170,000 good deeds during events. Well, here we mean various events and projects. This is also 13.5 million volunteer hours. Let me tell you more details about our services. Our key services include our training platform, training module, which have provided training courses to 260,000 people, providing 34 different courses with issuing certificates. We're expecting a new draft of trainees anytime soon, so you're welcome. These courses are prepared in association with the leading teachers and trainers of top educational organizations. We are tasked with not just educating and training people, but motivating them towards volunteering. Also, we're providing a competition module. Here you can participate as part of the volunteer center. We're actually running a special award, international award, which is called We're Together. The award is 100 million rubles. It helps you to have your say to the world and be heard and be seen and be known. And dozens of people take part in it with their initiatives. And this competition has really enjoyed a lot of popularity over the time it has existed. Also, we have a journal module, Dobro.journal. It's a media project about the creative civic activity. We have an enticing content for the readers that incentivizes people to take part in volunteering and doing something good every day. And we have almost 900 authors writing for us and 92,000 readers. And actually, they are quite active because we have a lot of comments under every article. So people do feel inspired. Our task is to convert at least 1% of the readers into volunteers. And right now, we're meeting the plan. We are promoting our projects even without the participation of our editor's office. We have a lot of authors who regularly publish interesting articles, and the best articles will find their way to the editorial, to the top page. This is how we support people in promoting their ideas and initiatives. The module called the Broad Analytics gives you a lot of statistics about the volunteering movement in your region, in other regions of the country. Here you can look at the figures, at the stats, and select what you would like to participate in, what type of activity is most interesting to you. You can compare, you can analyze. Our platform also provides other opportunities to interested people, but the key ones for volunteers is the opportunity of growth in the civil society. When you register with our platform, you become a user of our system of services, and you become eligible for training courses, for participation in various projects, for finding partners and friends. We have mobility programs that allow you to travel to other regions, to participate in volunteering projects. We can help you find yourself in any spheres that appeal to you most. Become part of a larger cause, and apart from empathy, an emotional component, receive some tangible results. For example, making or complementing your portfolio for future employment. We're in the process of integrating with employment services, and we're trying to promote a volunteering portfolio as one of the benefits or advantages that you can announce in your CV, because this tells about your empathy, about your willing to help those around you. And it tells others that you're not an indifferent person, that you care. Now many people already know that your volunteering score can actually help you during entering a university. In the future, we're trying to transform our platform to work in sync with the loyalty programs of various businesses. These will require cooperating with business partners. We're in the process of launching this program. Right now, you know that probably there are projects that can help you convert your good deeds into something useful when you shop, when you do something else. So this is something that we try to implement with our platform too. For organizers, the platform can also be useful in that it helps you bring down your costs of event organization on account of volunteering assistance. I have a separate presentation for organizers
or entities. Give me just 1 second, please. So I hope everyone can see my slides. The second presentation I'm going to give. So it is dobro.ru. We call ourselves Dobro RF in Russian, and we will promote this brand, but dobro.ru is also a full reflection of our brand. So we will use this name too. So what can we offer to entities? How can we help you? And what do we want to do for you? In the first place, we help you find the best volunteers. We save your time and money for recruitment. Why does it happen? Because we have the biggest database of people who want to help, who want to be volunteers. It is the biggest in terms of number of registrations, number of visits, number of views. And this database helps find you people in any area of Russia. So once you start recruiting volunteers to your entities, you will see a digital footprint of each volunteer. This will help you not simply find a person who wants to be a volunteer, but specific people with specific skills and background. You immediately see his record on dobro.ru, whether he had any negative reviews, how well he is prepared to be a volunteer, has he had any trainings. So it's a great tool. And if you find people whose knowledge you have no confidence in and you want to organize a training, so as you create vacancies for volunteers, you can mention a requirement to have a training at the volunteer university, and also will help you find volunteers with a minimal level of knowledge. Also, there is one entity that performs verification of volunteer knowledge, and I will speak about that later. So there is an entity that searches for people with specific skills and knowledge. So also will help you retain your volunteers, those whom you have found and recruited. We help you implement CRM systems, mailings. We save your resources for engagement mailings, for volunteers to remember you, receive updates of your events, news, etc., so that volunteers don't overlook vacancies or important activities. So, and also you can accumulate knowledge about each volunteer and his experience in working with your entity. So we help you retain volunteers. And also we provide the loyalty program that you can share with your volunteers, measures of government support. So you will have chats and communication channels with volunteers that we offer. Also, there is a credit card of mailings. I will speak about that. I spoke about that already. And also, we have an electronic volunteer book or record approved by the Russian government. So this basically creates a volunteer portfolio which keeps volunteers on our platform and which helps you retain your volunteers in your organization. So keep in touch with them, keep them engaged and motivated. and bring them back to the platform. So our platform also helps you find resources. This is dobro.contests. I will speak about that too. Ability to promote your events. You will have an opportunity to receive informational support because you can place your vacancies on our platform, because your target audience will be at your hand. And a lot of other opportunities, projects of the federal or regional level. And near term, in November, we will launch a new service, Dobro Navigator. Yes, we have a test version which has been launched. It is not public yet because it doesn't have enough information, but this service will consolidate all measures of support in Russia, measures of support for volunteer organization. So we have an ambitious goal to consolidate leaders of social initiatives and volunteer programs. So the problem is that there are a lot of measures of support offered by the government and commercial companies, foundations, but it is not easy to find something that is applicable to you. This is almost unreal at this point of time. When we wanted to add some information to Dobro Navigator, we had a lot of problems searching for information at different sites, in PDF documents. So what we do is to create a good catalog of services, of measures of support, so that the government and big organizations have personal accounts or company accounts on our platform, and they will be able to update the information on their support measures. What else do we do for you? We help you promote your initiatives. So this is Dobro magazine, and this is a great tool that you can use on a regular basis and update your information about your company, about your entity and your events. So dobro.ru saves your money. This is outdated information as of the end of last year, but just as an example, you can sit down and make a calculation. We reduce the cost of training costs, volunteer training costs. We offer dobro.university services. At present, we have a lot of certified volunteers. So basically, we were able to save about 2 million rubles for not-for-profit organizations last year, which is quite a good number. Well, actually, it is not 2 million, it is 200 million. 2 million for those entities that took part in our platform. So our volunteers submitted their applications on our platform. What does it mean? It means that we can help save your costs, because but for us, you would have to spend time on CRM systems, interaction with volunteers, recruitment of volunteers. And this is the money you don't need to waste. We can offer this to you. Trigger mailings, which is a good basis for the marketing efforts. So we offer this to you for free, etc., etc., etc. A lot of good things. So if you calculate the man hours and money that we save for you, is impressive. So please come to us and we'll save even more resources for you. Matvey, thank you so much. We have a question. The first question is, what is a CRM system? You mentioned this acronym several times, but not all our attendees understand what it is. So please explain, what do you mean by CRM, and what benefits does CRM provide to volunteer organizations or not-for-profit organizations, and in management of volunteers for culture entities, for institutions of culture. Maybe CRM is not an accurate term. What do we mean by this? This is a conventional system for managing volunteer contacts. So each registered company on our platform is given the CRM system by default. What is it in fact? So for example, you post your event on our platform and all applications coming to this program will be stored there. So you'll be able to review a digital footprint of every volunteer. You can see the full digital portrait of this volunteer and decide whether you want to approve this volunteer or you don't want to take him or her in this program. So the CRM system stores all the applications, and over time you will have a good database, a good list of volunteers who have contacted you one way or another. Also, the CRM system keeps information of other volunteers who, for example, pressed the button help one of your projects, or they pressed the button meaning that they're ready to support other NGO organizations. So all these contacts get into your CRM system. And there is also functionality that helps you place a reference link on dobro.io, and all people who will come to you through this link will automatically get into the CRM system. So in the social networks or on the website, you'll be able to place this link. So a person gets registered on dobro.io, and he then eventually shows up on your list. So what can you do with this contact list? You can invite people from this list to your new events, or if a person pressed the button ready to help, he or she will automatically get notifications of your updates, new events, and you will keep him posted of your new activities. So you can sort this list in any way depending on your needs to be able to select certain volunteers, for example, who worked for your company or who contacted your entity or who pressed this ready to help button. So you may do this sorting, this selection, and do a targeted mailing to a given group of volunteers. So you can adjust your CRM system and to do this for you and send invitations. Also, the CRM system can help you manage volunteer experience of people who come to your event. Also, you assign hours to each volunteer, depending on how many hours he or she worked for you. So volunteer hours will be counted and they will be motivated and encouraged to do more. So this is a focal point of your volunteer contacts, which reduces your costs for accounting and recording, accounting and records. So we develop the CRM system on a continuous basis for it to become even better. Matvey, there are two more questions. Number one, how to become a verified entity? And number two, what is the difference between verified hours from regular hours? And does it mean if we don't have verified hours, we're worse? No, you're not worse, of course. You're always the best if you do something, if you invest in development of Russia. Volunteer movement. Well, volunteer means that you do something voluntarily. So we don't want everyone to be registered through Gosuslugi, governmentservices.ru. What we want to achieve is
ли все свои данные нам, да, и подтверждать ли свой статус, свои практики и так далее, или не подтверждать, а просто как-то работать в легкую.
So it's up to a volunteer to decide whether he wants to become official or not. So verified hours, what does it mean? On the government level, there is a big loyalty program for volunteers. And sometimes we may be asked, can you prove that the person has received those hours? That's why we introduced the concept of verified hours. For organizations who already have a digital footprint on our platform, who assigned verified hours to volunteers, the fact that they have at least 20 volunteers on their list, and they have never participated in any questionable events, untrustworthy events. This helps us understand who is who. So entities who applied verification requests will earn more confidence and trust on behalf of everyone. So what can we say? This experience of verified organizations, of entities, is a good experience. So far, it's an information-driven effort. So for people to differentiate verified experience from non-verified experience, verified hours from non-verified hours. As I said, entities who left their digital footprint on dobro.ru have the right to apply for the verification status. So we offer regional level organizations to do this and to perform verification of volunteer entities or NGO in their respective regions, because they have better understanding and better knowledge of what is going on in their region to make a decision in favor of verification. There are certain issues, however, bureaucratic issues of creating an institution of regional representatives. We want to achieve a good coverage across the country, but those regional representatives do have issues with personal data protection and things like that. What I'm trying to say that the verification service is not available everywhere, but in the coming month, we'll provide an opportunity for entities to apply for verification where regional representatives are not yet in place. We'll try to make sure this verification process is available even for those regions where regional representatives are not available yet. Where can we find contacts of regional representatives? And if regions have those representatives, maybe our attendees will be able to contact this person directly. There is dobro.analytics service. If you enter this service and select a specific region, you will find the information about the region in general, about the government entities responsible for volunteer movement, and a contact person, that regional representatives, if it is existent in that given region. Thank you. One more question. I think it's a standard question. Our movement has been in place for 3 years, and we still receive questions like that. How to motivate heads of cultural government organizations? Usually these are not young people. How to engage them in using portal services? So what can you say? I think I explained the benefits of our platform, and I've already explained how we can help you save costs and use the CRM system. So this is a system, a unique system that officially registers volunteer experience. Well, very soon, we will get rid of paper-based volunteer records, and all those records will become electronic.
If an organization is willing to use its volunteers, it will have to use our system to register volunteers. This will help to extend tangible gratitudes to volunteers, not only from the organizations, but from the state. Another question, and actually questions keep coming in. Well, there is a specifying question regarding verification. Is it only public, are these only public organizations that can do verification? There are certain rules to that. You have to be registered as a legal person. You cannot have verification without being a legal entity. Non-profit organizations, public organizations can be registered and verified. A lot has been said about services and updates, and a lot of people say that they have seen the updates and they are wondering why they are so often so frequent. And can you please elaborate on the application called Dobro.rf? What is it about? Thank you for the question. Regarding updates, we try to apply a product approach in developing our services. That means that every day we measure analytics, we regularly interview our users, and we process thousands and thousands of emails and letters that we receive monthly from users. So we take account of that, and based on our research and survey that we put together from various sources and channels, we set our goals, which are quite ambitious. We want as many people as possible to make use of our platform so that our platform can be useful to many people for various purposes. Our updates are quite frequent because we try to keep pace with the requirements of our users. Well, quite recently we have launched major updates pertaining to the platform on the whole. That happens sometimes, and I quite understand that when people have got used to something, it may be rather painful to them to get used to something new, and I really understand that. I know that Facebook is providing the functionality of an old interface, but we still have to learn something new. If our functionality proves not operational, we do the rollback. So our recent update, first of all, pertained to repacking of all our services and placing them on a more in a more comfortable format and readable format. You might have mentioned that. We're now posting not only events, announcements, but also information materials provided by third-party services like online courses, articles from relevant magazines, so that people could use something interesting, could see something interesting for themselves, and you can search not only for good deeds, but for articles, courses. This is what is available right now. We want users to constantly find relevant information for themselves. There used to be 2 stages of registration. First, physical person, then out of his personal account, the person could create a legal entity and register as administrator of such a legal entity. Now we have combined these 2 steps into one, so people can do everything from one and the same window. Well, updates also covered the appearance of the program. Well, also speaking about functionality, in order to find an event, you had to open several windows. Now we have improved that functionality, and the volunteers' path to search for an event has been simplified and made more user-friendly. And we really hope that this update will help us convert more readers and users into actual volunteers. Also, we're working on simplifying the interfaces for our organizers. We know that functionality has been growing, and interface has been getting more complex because of that. So what we have been trying to do with these updates is making the interface and user path more understandable and more simple. Speaking about the application, the Bro.rf, it has been launched quite recently. There used to be a different application that was called Volunteers of Russia. It has become obsolete by now. So the idea of the new app is about making life easier for volunteers and making it easier for them to find projects and to find camps. Volunteers can use our app to find a good deed that really appeals to them and file an application for participation. It has become easier with this app than it used to be. Right now, there is no need to enter your email to check for any news feed. The new functionality, which has never been used before, is the check-in, check-out function. If a volunteer comes to you for assistance, usually they put the special button, check in, and then when they leave, they press the button, check out. Now this can be done using the app. You don't have to check the attendance against your hard copy records. Also, inside the system, you will see information about the geoposition of the volunteer at the moment of pressing the check out button, so as to eliminate possible frauds. Such large functionalities have been launched quite recently. Of course, any beginning is always bumpy, so we're trying to see how well it's functioning and then to fine-tune the functionality. There are many other stories to it too. Any first releases did not find it quite smooth when they were launched. Currently, our developers are providing a more stable version of the app for not only for the iOS but for Android as well. So check out the app. Many errors have been eliminated. Probably there will be more services for the organizers. We will not transfer the contact management system, volunteer contacts management system, because it will be hard to manage from the app. But we will certainly try to add the functionality which will simplify communication and interaction with the volunteers. Thank you very much. Apart from a lot of changes, Matvey's team has a great understanding of the relevant tools for notification of people. So in order to be always in tune, to be always in touch, of course, there is the Telegram channel, relevant channel. There are weekly digests. There is the website. There is the app, and people will get very convenient, very easily read digest information and news, so that you could always stay in touch with what's happening with the latest developments. It is important to be someone who is interested in the development, who regularly visits the website or app, not just visits it occasionally. And this system, the Bro.rf, is quite flexible and scalable. When it was just beginning, when the whole volunteer movement was just beginning in Russia, it was quite important to create a resource for the cultural volunteers that would be integrated with a comprehensible system. And now culturevolunteers.rf is a good database which is integrated with your website. It is important for people to see how many volunteers are there at hand. And I understand that you're walking the path of maximum integration with these relevant databases, so that people using one and the same interface could see how many volunteers there are, their qualifications, and so on and so forth. Also, recently, a new service has been launched, a service or a filter, which is called Projects. There you can see Association of Volunteer Centers and other organizations, and you can register as volunteer there. In order to be subscribed to all the cultural development and new developments and news as a volunteer, you have to register there. Right now, there are quite a number of organizations register their key events with this portal. So people who own information own the world, as they say. So the more resources you have at hand, the more opportunities you have, the stronger your team will be, and the more there will be opportunities for you as organizers to reinforce your events, to recruit a stronger crew of volunteers. It's great that you have your own database of organizations and institutions. It's great that you have your own contact base of volunteers, but still, there are lots of people who don't even know that you run regular festivals, for example, where volunteers could be of help. because you're operating in a local field. So this website, the Bro.ru, helps you to attract many people with diverse qualifications to assisting you with your projects. If we speak about the accessibility of cultural institutions, well, of course, there can be remote settlements, remote locations, and websites, applications will make it easier for you to ensure the widest possible coverage. Speaking about the integration of the two systems, I keep receiving questions about that. They are related to the number of cultural volunteers. Of course, we are a large team. We're constantly working in this field, but this is also a great achievement for us when we expand our base. When we were just at the beginning, it was important to agree at the beginning about the way we will count volunteers. It doesn't have anything to do with the values of volunteership, but when we come to incentives, when we come to some awards, we understand that it's important to use the resources to support people, to empower them. And this is what we need analytics for. And it's quite good that in the Bro.rf you have a separate module called analytics. And our task was to understand how to count volunteers and make it in an automatic way. So this functionality, these functions have also been altered. Also, there is a question of who a volunteer is. Is it a person who registers here or there? This is a person who presses the button, take part as a volunteer in a certain event, even once, then received the confirmation from the organizers that that person has been there with the indication of hours. It is then that the person is entered into the database. We understand that more than 20,000 people, all in all, is a great number, but out of this number, not all people participate just in events. Other people take part in volunteership through training on courses or online services. We have quite a number of filters. So this system is very flexible and scalable, and which is also tied to the portal Dobro.rf and depends on the updates. For example, when you say that we need to find where a certain volunteer is, we understand how important that functionality really is that you're providing. We understand that there are slots that organizations can create that remain empty, and their only purpose is to serve the statistics showing that there were so many volunteers in an event. So this has to be avoided, and that's why we need that functionality, that new functionality of checking in and out for volunteers. We understand that without new functionality, without effectiveness, and without proper understanding of the ultimate goal, no volunteers will join us. So that's why we try to make all the processes as automated as possible. Of course, we should not leave by statistics alone, because reality change. We are trying to make the system transparent and open, and honest, because this is the basis for forming a material and immaterial support of volunteers, and that's important to be responsible at each level when you perform certain functions of developing cultural volunteership. This is something I had to mention because that's relevant for our community. And I hope that the messages and tools Matvey has mentioned will be of help to you, and you have a unique opportunity to download the application and then address the technical support, receive feedback, and send your feedback about the application. It's not about feedback alone, but your participation in making the application and ultimately the whole network better and more operational. We always try to take account of the comments from regional communities. So feel free to address us, feel free to provide your feedback. We're always open. So if you see anything, if you understand that something can be made better, please write to us. We're always open.
So, to continue our dialogue, we do not have any more questions. But what plans do you have? What are the plans of the portal, of the platform? What is ahead of you next year, and what are the main trends? What is needed for such huge systems like yours? I'm sure that many of our attendees realize how big such a platform is, how much coverage does it offer. So what is your opinion about future trends? Yes, indeed. We have a lot of plans. I can't really share all of them with you. So we're trying to use a product-based approach and be flexible in changing our priorities and plans depending on the industry or area where we keep track on. So we try to create products that meet demands. This is how we created the university, the magazine, etc. So in November, the first version of Dobro.Navigator will be available on the website. And also we will create the final catalog for the users. The full-fledged functionality will be launched next year. We believe it is a big story, a cool story that will totally change the level of transparency in our industry and open up diversity of resources which are hidden so far, remain hidden so far. As to the trends, as far as the trends are concerned, our platform, here is what happened to it. 3 years ago, when I came to work with this team, when I joined the team, this project was small and then it grew to something bigger. From a simple idea of consolidating volunteers and volunteer organizations, it grew into something bigger, and we wanted to maintain the project on the one hand and make it a real infrastructural phenomenon for civil initiatives and volunteer movements. So a decision was made to split our services and develop each service separately. Mass media, educational platform, and other areas of development, which we call services. We still decided to develop them separately, but consolidated under one umbrella, which we now call Dobro.id. So our idea is to give each volunteer an identification number, and the system will collect all the information about this volunteer to create his digital portfolio. So by the end of the year, in order to enhance this, we will launch a small service, small so far, that will probably influence the industry down the line. We will launch the map of competences of a volunteer. So we will collect all digital prints of volunteers, make it visual, easy to understand, to be able to track the development of each volunteer, what competences he or she has developed or improved. This will help evaluate the level of volunteer entity development and the level of volunteers themselves, the level of development of volunteers themselves. So our goal is to collect as many footprints as possible, to get as much data as possible, and on the basis of this data, analyze, perform analysis, automatic analysis, and create an objective picture of the volunteer development in the regions. Although we offer certain services that could meet the maximum number of volunteers and volunteer organizations, we understand that not all business processes existing in different entities can be satisfied with our services, because some companies have specific business services. There are cultural volunteers, emergency situation volunteers, social volunteers. It is impossible to meet the needs of everyone. So the global trend of our system development is decentralization. We will be a uniform hub that will help register volunteer experience, get necessary information, have lead generation system, recruitment, training. At the same time, specific business processes will be implemented in the information systems of each specific organization, but there should be interfaces to integrate with us, to send us data on the one hand and get data from us. We do have this interface API software which helps us exchange data across systems. For example, it is possible to register volunteer experience and take the information from a third-party organization, or it is possible to collect information about events on the platform and place the information on an individual website. So we welcome companies to join our interface. I think we'll provide this interface to the community so that we become a big decentralized and comfortable to use platform. So what is a platform? A platform is some foundation on which we can create all kinds of services, projects, initiatives. We will want to provide access to this platform for companies, for entities to create their own initiatives. And this may become a big breakthrough or a big trend. Open data and open opportunities is a great trend overall. Matvey, thank you for this extensive answer. Well, we need to watch our timelines. So this is the end of our today's meeting. Hopefully, those who joined us online and asked their questions, they received answers to their questions. If you still have questions remaining, please send us through the portal, through regional representatives on dobro.ru or by any other means. So please take initiative. This will help us create a uniform system which will become huge, serious, open, and useful. So Matvey, thank you for your time to speak in front of our big community. I'm sure we'll have more meetings of that kind because there is a lot of information, there are a lot of updates, and cultural volunteers, us, are always ready to offer ideas about services that might be useful for us on dobro.ru. We're moving to the next meeting. Daria, sorry for interrupting. I wanted to say my last word with the most important information. Sorry for jumping in. Anyone who works in cultural volunteer activities, so come to our website, get to the tab Organizers, and we have a good landing page explaining what I have just said. And also there is an interesting service called Mail Course. You can subscribe for this mail course. It's a training course that will be released very soon. It will be made of several letters in which we will briefly but clearly explain all the tips and tricks and life hacks of working with our platform. And in those letters, we will explain how to enhance your volunteer community with our platform. So please come on our website and subscribe. This is the information with an asterisk for those who, it's a reward for those who listen to us until this moment. Hopefully you heard this recommendation and I hope you will make good use of it. Good use of the information shared by Matvey. Matvey, we appreciate it a lot. So hopefully we'll see you more frequently in our community. So I've just announced the next event that will take place in 3 to 4 minutes. Yesterday, we discussed soft and hard skills, education and training. We have a lot of master classes and practical sessions, workshops dedicated to personal competitions in the offline part of our event. But today, we decided to dedicate 1 hour of our time and your time to explain how educational programs are organized and how to make education accurate, professional, and targeted. Oftentimes, the world is changing very fast and you want to transmit information well, but it is not always done professionally. That's why we invited 2 very cool experts, outstanding experts that will share their advice, recommendations, and best practices that would help us make your educational programs better. For example, cultural volunteer school or anything else, or some specific events for cultural entities to make those educational programs better. Education training is changing a lot, is undergoing a lot of changes, and we're using dobro.ru resource, and it shows that education should be hybrid and should be versatile. It should be both online and offline. So in 2 to 3 minutes, please come back to us and you will hear answers to all your questions about education and training. So, friends, we continue our agenda. We'll speak about the training of volunteers, development of educational programs, methods of development, selection of appropriate formats of training, and we will consider specific cases and exercises. Let me introduce Alla Ivoeva, leading manager in educational programs in the Association of Volunteer Centers. Hello, Alla. Hello. And Igor Demenko, head of Integration Cultural Center named after Ostrovsky in Moscow. So I'm giving the floor to Alla first. She will speak about educational programs for volunteer centers. The floor is yours. Hello, colleagues. Thank you. Thank you, the hosts of this event. Attendees, I congratulate you on such a wonderful event as International Volunteer Camp. Today, my topic is training of volunteers, and we will speak in greater detail about the phases of training and how to organize this process. The first phase of training is selection of the target audience and target setting, goal setting. Well, first you need to understand what outcomes you would like to achieve as a result of training. What should be the end product of your training? And given that, you define the goal. You set the goal for the target audience. For example, if you want to engage citizens in supporting a big museum-based event, then the target audience would be young people, students, active citizens, maybe visitors of the museum. So for this goal, however, this goal doesn't apply to leaders of volunteer movement. Their training is based on a different concept. They're interested in how building the managerial model and how to organize activities to make all stakeholders be comfortable and happy. So first of all, as we plan education, as we plan training, we need to define the goal and the target audience. The next step is to research the interests of your target audience. And you may need to have a survey, a study of interests and needs of your target audience, and also understand what other partner organizations do in this field. For example, entities located in a different municipality or region of the Russian Federation. So first understand what your target audience is interested in, how are they motivated, what are the incentives, what would volunteers want to see, to learn, to do, what speakers they might want to listen to. Some volunteers may be interested in seeing heads of cultural institutions. Other volunteers may want to meet ministers or of culture of a given regional municipality. Or some volunteers may be interested in professional skills, get in contact, in touch with the trainer, and learn more. This is much more than just listening to a guest speaker. So as you survey this, this will help you understand what your target audience is interested in and what your colleagues are doing in this field, what type of events are organized. It may turn out that other entities already do what you only think about doing. It doesn't mean that you shouldn't organize a training program, but at the same time, you should understand what benefits are offered by other organizations, what interesting topics they discuss, maybe meet with heads of those entities or lead experts who are engaged in training activities.
And this will help you, on the one hand, to avoid problems that are faced by your colleagues. On the other hand, you will be able to analyze their experience, and based on that, realize what your target audience is interested in. You will be able to understand what is the purpose of your training and what will be the results of it, what you want your trainees to take away from your training course. The whole training is built according to the purpose and your understanding of when, whom, and how you will train for which type of events. That may be a minor master class or a series of master classes for volunteers that systematically assist cultural institutions, and you want them to acquire skills and knowledge that will help them better understand the whole project or the specifics of the field they're working in. You might want to charge the audience with motivation to make a closer, knit team so that they do not only have contacts of some of the people they know, but so that they know how to ask for help, whom to ask for help, how to share ideas and projects and collaborate. You might want to arrange a series of training seminars which would not be long-lasting, which would not be lengthy, like something like 1 hour, and running a couple of days, just to support the kids' motivation or the people's motivation, and maybe train them some new skills. A good advice here is not to try and set the goals of teaching some profound knowledge or some profound skills during your training sessions. They are volunteers, and their volunteer activity to assist, to help cultural institutions may not always require profound, deep knowledge of the subject, though in some cases it really does, but for most of the cases they will have to do something on their own to find out more information that's relevant to what they're currently doing, to find out the peculiarities of tending to some monuments or some architectural objects. What you absolutely need to do is motivate people to continue working within projects, volunteering projects, and that should be one of your priorities in training programs. This also prompts you the format of your training. Try to abstain from lectures or some deep and profound discussions. Try to present information in an easy and comprehensible way and make your training process interesting. Try to model some practical cases that would be relevant to the activity of volunteers during their training. Do some role play and discuss how you can how important a certain skill and knowledge is using this practical experience. Put a focus on these aspects. After you have made your educational program and you understand that you don't need large-scale training, but you need just one masterclass, not some 2-3 days, whole day sessions, but just like a small masterclass. You can feel free to consult with your colleagues, with the volunteers that systematically assist cultural institutions. Believe me, there are frequent cases when, while developing an event or program, we keep within our own walls, so to say, and that means working on the level of geniality. Believe me, only collaboration will make the program truly creative, especially when you can seek feedback from your partners or from experienced volunteers, or maybe from your partnership organization or a neighboring volunteer center. And quite often, a fresh look from the outside will help you to pay attention to some aspects that you would never notice or think about yourself. So please remember about that. Don't be shy and reach out to the community for feedback about your program. Usually, after showing your educational program or event to colleagues, you might have to backtrack to some previous stages and rethink some of the stages, to rethink the format. That's not ruled out. But after getting a constructive feedback, you will have to work through the fine-tuning stage. That's a given. That's quite obvious. So please be prepared that your opinion, your approach might be or might have to be changed or altered somehow. It is important to also think about the forms of control that will help you understand that trainees have learned something, that the information you have given was truly helpful to them, that they remembered everything, that the results actually coincide with your target. Most often, many organizations, training organizers, resort to testing or quizzes, which is quite a quick way to check for knowledge, but don't stick to it through thick and thin. There are other formats of checking the knowledge and skills or training results among your trainees. you might also use some interesting forms of control, which will also help them learn something new from one another during testing. So don't just distribute some sheets of paper with questionnaires. For example, ask them to download some app and as a group answer some questions or some analytical questions, the answer to which should be worked out within a group. Try to run classes where you could model certain situations. Ella, I have a question here. Can you tell us about the existing educational program on the basis of volunteer centers right now? Which programs can our colleagues borrow and roll out in their regions? What programs are there for which volunteers can register right now? Can you tell us about the educational programs that are available right now and where tell us where we can find them? Thank you. When we were speaking about the system of control, we were gradually approaching this question. Okay, let me tell you more details about that. The Association of Volunteer Centers has a special service. One of the parts of the ecosystem is the portal called University, dobro.university. Even now, you can enter the portal, enter the university model, look through the available courses and register for them. Select the ones that appeal to you most. In our case, you can try and find cultural volunteer programs. You can also see risk management, client orientedness, customer centricity courses. That would also be relevant for the organizers. They will help you boost the productivity of your work. We also run offline educational programs, and in particular, this is the school of Dobro University, which has passed the accreditation of the Russian Federation, and in a day, we will start this program in Khanty-Mansi autonomous territory, and then in Khakassia and the Khabarovsk territory, in the Vologda region, and the Republic of Adygea, and Bryansk region, and the Nizhny Novgorod region. So if you're from these subjects of the Russian Federation, you can take part in an offline training program that we are providing. It will be a program for 3 days and divided into 2 flows for organizers and for volunteers. All the classes will be practice-focused and aimed at direct training of the skills which are taught by the trainer, which are presented by the trainer. You will be able to see presentation videos and other materials. So in all given to you in a most comprehensible way. And they are available to all volunteers regardless of their priority areas where they assist. Because I know that volunteers try not to be focused on some specific area, but try to expand their expertise in multiple fields. So I have mentioned the regions where this year we will arrange offline training. Next year we will expand the list of the regions covered by the Debro University courses. If your region is still not in the list, we hope that next year you will see yourself in the list, and hopefully we will cover you for next year. Also, try and keep track of what's happening on district forums. They also provide very attractive educational opportunities and experience sharing opportunities. In the middle of October, we're planning on launching a series of webinars for the volunteer communities where we will speak about rather universal subjects that will be understood and interesting to both volunteers and organizers. These are the main sources of educational and training sessions for volunteer centers. The Brodot University portal also has a module called Documents. You can enter this module and look for various training materials that can be helpful in your day-to-day work. There you will see documents containing experience and recommendations and practices of your colleagues or specialists from educational institutions of the federal level. So you will be able to see all of this there. You can also apply directly to the association and with your questions. And this is probably the most relevant, the most important information that I plan to share with you. Should you have any questions, I will gladly answer them. Thank you. Thank you. Just by way of stock taking, there is an online educational opportunity for cultural institutions, staff, organizers, volunteers, and offline training sessions in the regions. You mentioned the regions that will be covered by your training sessions. Is there any place we can actually see that list of eligible regions? We haven't published that list yet. Okay, in that case, we will try and give this list of regions to our participants after this discussion. Thank you very much, Alla. That was the manager of training programs of the Association of Volunteer Centers. Okay, and we hopefully we will see you all at their training sessions. Alla, please stay with us. And now I would like to come over to Igor Demenko. Based on your center called Integration and named after the famous Russian writer Ostrovsky, you're also active in terms of volunteership. Please, can you tell more about your center, because I would like more people to know about it. I have visited your center repeatedly to show various shows, If you can share the efficiency of this format with us, that would be brilliant. Do you have any other formats of training? And I encourage everyone to visit the Integration Center. I still remember that show, and I have goosebumps because I haven't felt anything like that in my life. Now the floor is yours. Good time of day, and thank you for such a favorable commendation of our cultural projects. Let me tell a few words about myself. I represent the State Museum called Integration. It is called after Ostrovsky. That's a national scale institution that has a museum and training component. Everything is united by the function of the methodic organization for people with disabilities in order to have them included into the social life.
There is a lot to say about them, but please check our website for the project. As part of this session, I would like to speak about volunteers, volunteer training, and I will also speak about something different. I will largely speak about our joint project called People In, Люди In. Why do we need it? So, the Wings of Opportunities program was finalized last week. It took place in 4 big Russian constituencies. As we met with the participants, we spoke about inclusive volunteer activities, about volunteer activities in general, as we observe the trends in society, and we can see that on TV. We know incidents in St. Petersburg, on the playing grounds, in Volgograd, in one of the swimming pools. What those incidents show that people do not understand the problems of people with disabilities. So this project, People In, Люди In, is aimed at developing communication with people with disabilities to overcome communication and information barriers which stand in the way as we organize certain activities. I will now share my screen. I will speak about this project at length, Люди In, or in English, People In. So what is it? Actually, volunteers took part in this project as well. First of all, we focused on training of people working in the area of culture, regardless of their age, about their title, but the main goal of the project was to teach people to interact with people with disabilities. So, and people who can explain their needs are exactly the people with disabilities. They can explain how to build effective communication with them. So this is the team with disabilities that implements this project. 15 people. So basically, disabled people talk to healthy people about disabilities in very simple terms. So what do we see? Misunderstanding occurs at the very start of communication. This is situation-based communication. It is small, but further interaction, further communication with a person with disabilities depends a lot on this first moment. And this is important for people who are engaged in volunteering. They do experience such unpleasant moments. So what happens? So when a person is afraid, when he doesn't know what to do, what to say, his alarmed, and a normal human reaction is to avoid such situation. Avoid meaning not to interact, to stand away, stand aside, not communicate with people with disabilities. They don't know how to approach them, what to say, how to uh, interact. So people, healthy people, try to avoid communication, and people with disabilities is left alone when he comes to an event. So the training is about how to overcome this barrier, how to build this communicative function, how to shape culture of communication between healthy people and people with disabilities. In 5 years, we've been working with various entities, Moscow volunteers, cultural entities of the city of Moscow. Over 4,000 people took part in this event. So let me reiterate. For the sake of volunteer programs, volunteer entities, you may have to interact with people with disabilities. And it's very important to have a set of communicative skills, communication skills, and understand the main principles of comfortable communication with individuals with disabilities. This is certainly not a lecture. You don't need to make notes. This is an interactive story. It is made of 3 blocks: block of silence, block of darkness, and block of actions. The block of silence, so all this is related to types of disabilities. Block of silence is related to people with deafness. Block of darkness, people with vision issues, and block of actions, and these are people with limb disabilities. What else can I say here? The inclusion principle, which is strongly promoted, creation of inclusive environment, is often confused with available environment. Available environment is more related to physical items and architecture. So when we speak about people with disabilities and say, let us engage volunteers, yes, indeed, a lot of volunteers want to take part in events, in events dedicated to disabilities, and interact socially and culturally and sport-wise as well. But oftentimes, people, by inclusion, people understand available environment, comfortable environment. But inclusion is all about people. Inclusion is the art of living together. So as we prepare our wonderful volunteers, it is important to teach them skills of communication with people, with disabled people, and help and teach them to overcome communication barriers and behavioral barriers. And in order to start communication, you simply need to start this communication. And then this volunteer environment will be accessible for everyone, including disabled people. Igor, thank you very much for that. This is a unique project. I have a question to you. Myself, I'm a volunteer. I can come to your center and learn how to communicate with disabled people. Do you have this program? Do you have this volunteer training program? Or are you going to offer such a chance? I agree with you when you say inclusive environment is important, comfortable environment is important, but we need people to be there. Those disabled people need to be able to join this environment. Sometimes disabled people stay at home because there is no communication with society. So I, as a volunteer, would like to help a disabled person walk around this environment, but I need to learn how to communicate. Yes, this is a very good question, and you put the right focus. Indeed, there is very little available environment for disabled people to be able to implement their capabilities as volunteers. I have a good example to give you. So a person on a wheelchair comes to a museum, and it's a good museum, comfortable for disabled people, but his comment was horrible. He said, well, thank you for the for a good toilet, but this is not what I came for to the museum, not to go to the toilet only. So cultural organizations have done a lot to ensure architectural availability for people with disabilities. But you know, now we have wheelchair paths, we have all other technical means. But why do people with disabilities not come to museums? The problem is, yes, you can get to a museum on a wheelchair, but if the museum employee is afraid of interacting with a person with disabilities, it means that this disabled person will not be able to get a quality service in that museum. So that's why the training program was aimed at people who interact with disabled people, who organize inclusive events in a given museum or other site. So please, you can search Люди In on the internet and find information about the project. The project is aimed at people working in the cultural organizations. You can file an application on the website saying that you want to be trained. Your application will be reviewed. So these are group trainings, and they are formed according to a certain schedule. So once we have applications, we'll form a group and organize a training. So please, volunteers from cultural volunteers, please pay attention to our website, Люди In, file your application in participating in this project. Thank you, Igor. I want our listeners and attendees to pay attention to Люди In project, review the tools, and it would be great to have a similar training center in our regions for cultural volunteers to learn how to interact with disabled people, be able to help disabled people use this comfortable environment, inclusive environment, be able to visit museums, parks, and other interesting sites. Igor Sergeyevich, thank you very much. I appreciate questions. I appreciate presentations. Now our participants will break into groups and further discuss international cooperation of cultural volunteers. And tomorrow we will resume at 10 o'clock. So please join our channel. Thank you, colleagues. Alla, if you're still with us, thank you for your input. So have a great day and see you tomorrow. Thank you. Yes, take care and have a good day.
Я получил образование в библиотеке совершенно бесплатно, отмечал знаменитый писатель Рэй Брэдбери. Современные учреждения культуры, библиотеки, музеи, театры – не просто места, где можно прикоснуться к прекрасному. Они помогают в саморазвитии и образовании. И для создания новых форматов и событий им нередко бывает нужна наша с вами помощь.
Волонтеры нужны для того, чтобы делать то, что мы не можем делать без них. В частности, нам волонтеры помогают быть больше, чем музей.
Для многих волонтерство открывает новые возможности. Человек думает, а что такое библиотека? А что такое музей? Это пыльные книги, это пыльные экспонаты. Но когда приходит сюда в качестве волонтера, он видит совсем другую картину. Он понимает, что именно здесь можно реализовать свои интересы.
Программа «Волонтеры культуры» создает и развивает добровольческое движение в самых разных уголках страны, как в столице, так и в регионах, как в больших городах, так и в сельских поселениях. Мы оказываем всестороннюю поддержку волонтерскому сообществу. С нашей помощью добровольцы могут реализовать свой потенциал и получить новые компетенции.
Библиотеки, как и любая культурная институция, сегодня, конечно, не могут жить и обходиться без участия в жизни волонтеров и их вклада. И наша библиотека номер 119, библиотека времени, не исключение. Я вообще считаю, что волонтеры — это в первую очередь друзья, люди вовлеченные, которые разделяют ценности библиотеки.
Библиодобровольцы — это люди, которые помогают библиотекам практически во всех вопросах, которые возникают. Без них невозможно представить деятельность библиотек.
Присоединяйтесь к программе «Волонтеры культуры». Вы сможете не только помогать любимому музею или библиотеке, но и всесторонне развиваться. Новые знания и практический опыт помогают добровольцам в достижении поставленных целей. Главное – менять к лучшему жизнь вокруг. Помощь добровольцев нужна учреждениям культуры в любом городе. Ждем вас!
В значит волонтеры.
Почти в каждом городе есть старинные здания, которые определяют его лицо. Делают город отличающимся, необычным. Во многих таких зданиях сегодня располагаются музеи. Сюда приходят туристы, здесь происходят культурные мероприятия. Но многие объекты культурного наследия нуждаются в реставрации, ремонте, поддержке. Хотели бы что-то сделать для этих зданий, помочь в их восстановлении? Присоединяйтесь к программе «Волонтеры культуры». Программа поддерживает добровольческое движение, помогает беречь культурное наследие и исторический облик наших городов. Став участником, вы научитесь новому, поставите перед собой интересные, необычные цели, сможете реализовать собственные идеи и проекты, собрать свою команду для того, чтобы реальными делами помогать сохранению истории и развитию культуры.
Я думаю, что волонтерское движение – это вообще очень важный факт нашей жизни, вот современной. Волонтеры очень нужны, и мы все очень нуждаемся в них.
Принять участие в программе «Волонтеры культуры» может каждый. Помогайте сохранять свои города и их культурное наследие. Возраст не важен. Получить нужные умения и внести свой вклад могут все. Участвуйте в программе «Волонтеры культуры».
Я уже записался. Увидимся.